Hey everyone, welcome back to the Skeptical Leftist podcast. In this episode, I talk to Steve Shives. We discuss our journeys from the atheist and skeptic communities to where we are now, tackling issues way beyond just religion. We recorded this on October 21st, before the U.S. election, so we discuss some of the challenges and dynamics that were going on in our minds at that time. We talk about how the new atheist movement got us started, but how its limitations also pushed us towards progressive politics, leftist ideas, and addressing social justice issues that reach far beyond the bounds of religion. Steve and I dig into what it's like creating content in these spaces, handling community divides, and the ups and downs of growing and evolving politically. So whether you're a skeptic, a leftist, or just interested in how people's beliefs shift over time, this conversation has a lot to offer. Before we dive in, I want to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube and Spotify or wherever you are tuning in. If you're enjoying the content, leave a quick rating or a review on your favorite app. It really goes a long way in helping new listeners find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, go to patreon.com/skepticalleftist. You can support the show at any level, as low as $1 a month or $1.50 Canadian. And every bit helps so that I can keep doing this. Thanks for everything, and let's get into it. All right. Hi, and welcome to the Skeptical Leftist podcast, the show where I talk to a variety of people to spread critical thinking, progressive politics, and left-wing philosophy. And today I'm joined by Steve Shives. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
How's it going?
Not too bad.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad you invited me. Good to be here. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. We just talked on stream about the U.S. election a couple weeks ago. I'm almost done like a condensed version where I edit out the silences and stuff that I'm going to post again. So, and post to my podcast feed. So that'll be good for listeners to hear. I thought it was a pretty good chat.
I thought so. We had plenty to say.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot. Well, I didn't have so much to say, I guess.
Well, it's hard. See, that's the thing. When you do shows like that where there are 5 or 6 people, it's hard to, and especially when you're the host, you feel like, okay, well, I shouldn't talk over people. I shouldn't, push myself into here too hard and let the guests talk. But then you wind up just sitting there going, okay, interesting.
I agree. I was on Owen McDonald's channel yesterday.
And I was just on with him last weekend. Yeah.
I basically did the same thing. I sat there and I listened and just put my 2 cents in every now and then because that's all I can do sometimes.
Yeah.
But so I'm here to talk to you about your stuff. So I guess one of the things I want to ask people all the time is like, what are you politically?
Well, see, with me, I usually stick to just progressive because it's general enough that because I have found I have some really, really good friends who are further to the left politically than I am, I guess, because I'm not like, people who are further to the left who identify as like communists or anarchists or something like that. And so I have found some folks who are a little further to the left than me are very proprietary about like who qualifies as what.
Yep.
So I would not like I don't want to call myself a leftist if I'm not far enough to the left to qualify as that in the eyes of real leftists or people who are further to the left than I am. So like I don't want to. I'll just if somebody else watches my stuff or hears me talk and decides that I fall into a particular category, that's usually fine with me. I say progressive just because it generally covers my worldview. Although the interesting thing is, like when I was a kid growing up, especially in the mainstream media, like politics was very much a binary where and the two sides were conservative and liberal.
Yeah.
So for most of my life, I've called myself a liberal. But then once I got more involved in online political spaces, again, folks who are more toward the left, they don't like liberals either. It's not such a binary. It's more of a spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's not just, well, if you're on the left, you're a liberal. And if you're on the right, you're a conservative. There's a lot more gray area and there's a lot more options. So I kind of don't think of myself as a liberal anymore because most of the people that I pay attention to have that more sort of nuanced view
Right.
that's not the one I grew up with. And their version of liberal doesn't really describe my
Right.
thinking. But I used to call myself a liberal. Now I don't really do that anymore. It doesn't seem.
Yeah. For a
yeah.
while, there was the guys who called themselves classical liberals,
Oh, yeah.
but
Yeah.
they often were like centrists or right wingers, just
Yeah.
using the label because they liked Enlightenment philosophy, right?
Right. Right, exactly. It kind of became like a code word for, well, I'm really mostly a conservative.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they're the guys who now they're doing content or who are like anti-DEI or anti
Yeah.
anti-woke or whatever it is.
Yeah, and exactly, and whatever the next thing is, because we keep coming up with, they keep coming up with new terms for the same. Like when I was a teenager, it was politically correct. That was the thing. Oh, political correctness has run amok, and then it became. Yeah, it was political correctness, and then it was for a while it was woke, and now it's DEI.
Yeah,
and it's like, all right, you're talking about the same thing. You just keep changing the name for it.
Yeah, they called us SJWs back before
SJW.
Trump.
That was a big one for a while.
Yeah,
SJW.
It's funny
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny to think how long ago that was actually.
SJW stuck around for a while. It felt like they replaced, like they started to transition into DEI after woke had only been sort of in, common usage for a couple years. I'm like, oh, we're done with woke already? We're going straight into DEI? I barely got
right over that then.
I barely got used to saying woke.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like a liberal, in my perspective, often means somebody who still supports the status quo by and large, but is okay with just reforming certain things. So and for somebody with a more revolutionary kind of mentality, that could be frustrating.
Oh, I feel like with my friends who are further to the left, we kind of mutually frustrate each other because I know that I'm frustrating to them for not being radicalized. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they're sometimes frustrating to me because I did a video about this earlier this year where I said, look, to me, the reason why I feel very friendly toward people on the far left, whereas I feel like I have to oppose people on the far right, is that if people on the far left got their way and got to arrange the world the way they think it should work, that would be a pretty good world.
Yeah.
If everything worked the way people on the left think it should work, that's a world I would want to live in.
Yeah.
The far right, it's like a dystopia. And it's not even a matter of like, well, unintended consequences and that kind of thing. Like, no, if everything worked the way they literally want it to work, it would be a nightmare. Yeah. No, we can,
they'd be happy to have slaves. They'd be happy to have
exactly. It would be horrific. And if everything worked the way folks on the far left want it to work, it would be a pretty good world. It would be an improvement over what we have now. So that's why I don't view people on the far left, even if we have disagreements, I don't view it as a threat or as like, oh, those, extremists. Like, no, it's if that's the way things turn out, that's pretty good.
That actually is part of what radicalized me to where I am now, is like that frustration that everything was put as though the far left and the far right were the same all the time. Yeah. And you're like, well, these are not the same. Like, these people want everybody to have food and shelter.
Exactly. The aims are completely different. Like when I disagree with a leftist, it's usually over something practical. It's like, well, that sounds great. How are you going to do that? Right. But I almost never question the goal. I never question the thing that they want to achieve. I'm like, that would be great if that was possible. And if we could figure out how to do that, that would be terrific. Whereas someone on the far right, they're like, we shouldn't feed people who are starving. And I'm like, why are we?
Yeah, that's right.
What?
Or the people who call themselves libertarians, like you go like, you want to abolish the government so that the corporations can run the world? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, because they're much more reliable.
Yeah, because voluntarism or something.
Yeah, just Yeah, it's so yeah. There, in terms of intention and priority, and I mean, people on the left are far more committed to human rights and equality and acceptance of all people, and people on the right, it's like it's the exact opposite. It's
Yeah.
if you don't fit inside of the circle we drew, then we're going to
Yeah.
crush
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah, like you say, it's like on one hand you have maybe some impractical utopian ideas, and on the other hand you
Mhm.
have like actual dystopia, destroying the world kind of ideas.
Yeah, it's no comparison. And it's like, which side, if you don't fit perfectly into either extreme, like, okay, but which side do you want to work with? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. That's
all
right.
all of the things I really care about, like personally, all of the political issues that I am really passionate about, whether it's the environment or gun control or gun violence just as a problem in general, or trans rights or LGBTQ rights in general, or I mean, just civil rights or human rights as a broad category. Like it's
Yeah.
I have way more in common with people further to the left of me than I do with people to the right of me. Like I can't think of a single issue where I'd be like, well, it'd be better to work with the people over there on the right. There just isn't one.
No,
Their
that's right.
priorities are completely out of whack from where I am.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I can appreciate that. Do you, okay, so this is sort of tangentially related. So do you still have faith in the system in some ways?
I mean, in some ways, yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. I have faith in the possibility of the system. I don't know if I necessarily would because it feels really naive to say, and I would, if anybody else, especially if someone that I disagreed with on something were to say like, well, just trust in the system. That's really naive. Because the thing is, even though I believe in the existence, like I said, I'm not an anarchist. I believe there should be a government. I believe there should be some kind of system in place to, but systems don't operate themselves. When a lot of times we disembody things like that and we depersonalize it and we like, oh, just trust in the system. Well, I mean, there is no system. It's just a word we use to describe how we do things.
All these different things, layers of people doing various things.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I feel like that's important to remember. And I mean, because people on the left and people on the right, sometimes when they talk about the government or they talk about the state, whether at whatever level, whether it's like at, a national level or a global level or a local level, they talk about it like it's some kind of alien entity that, came down from outer space and imposed its will on us. And it's like, I mean, maybe it feels that way sometimes. I understand that.
It definitely does sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's just people.
Yeah.
It's just us. And so I believe in it in the sense that I believe it can be utilized for good. But that doesn't mean I don't have the kind of faith in it where I believe that it always will be, or that it should be treated as like sacrosanct and we shouldn't, want to change it or reform it or point it in a different direction,
No, that's totally fair. I mean, I am an anarchist, so
which is
so So I've got like my view of the state, and I often but I disagree with like a lot of communist states too. So I'm like, okay, well, that's because you put people in a hierarchy above each other without actually acknowledging the horizontal need.
Yeah.
But I can see how depending on who you're talking to, sometimes when you just say organizing people, they think of that as a type of state. So it depends on how you're discussing things with people, right?
Yeah. It depends on what your definition of terms is, for sure.
And and like I have no illusions that we're going to eliminate all states within my lifetime.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been YouTubing for quite a long time.
A while, yeah.
So I guess I found out about you during the new atheist movement types thing. I know we all said we weren't new atheists, but we were all in that milieu, right?
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that wave.
Yeah. So I guess, where is your channel now, and how did you transition from the atheist thing to now?
Well, as far as like the transition, it just sort of happened organically. I was fortunate in that even back when I was doing a lot of atheist content and when my channel first had its first like real growth spurt and when people started to know who I was, that was due to atheism related stuff. And,
Right.
you know, but even then, that's not the only thing I was doing.
Right.
That's
Right.
not the only thing I was talking about. I would talk about it a lot, and I had regular sort of series that I did that were atheism oriented, but I was also doing like comedy videos, and I was doing stuff about politics that weren't directly related to atheism or church and state or that kind of thing. And so when I it was a combination of I personally just became less interested in that conversation of, because I kind of felt like, okay, I don't think there's a God. I've said a lot about that.
I've reached my peak on that.
What else is there to say? Yeah. Well, because like I used one of my first YouTube series that got some attention, at least it got some attention in the atheist community, was when I would do these chapter by chapter breakdowns of Christian apologetics.
Oh yeah.
And I think I wound up doing like 25 of those, like over
geez.
several years. I would do 3 or 4 a year. And eventually I got to the point where I decided I was going to do one more year, or I think 4 more books, and then that was going to be it. Because I was like, I've said pretty much everything I can possibly say about this. All these books are the same.
Right.
Christian apologetics is one of the most intellectually dead genres of literature that you could imagine. Like they all make the same arguments. They all say the same things. They all have the same straw mans of atheists and secular people and evolutionary biology and all that. Like it's all the same.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do one more year, and I'm going to let everybody know ahead of time, this is the last year. And then I'm going to stop doing this before I start to hate this.
Right.
And that's what I did. And at the same time, the atheist community kind of, at least the atheist community online, which was the segment of it that I was the most interacting with, was becoming like a really disappointing place.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just felt like I wanted to move away from it for my own peace of mind. And also because, again, it's like, how many times can we have the same argument? And I got to a point where I was in my mid to late 30s, and I was married at the time. I've since gotten divorced, but I was married at the time. And I just was like, do I really want to argue with people on the internet about whether or not God exists? I mean, like, that just doesn't interest me. There's so many more interesting things to talk about. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had because I was podcasting from about 2013 to 2019. I podcasted in the atheist world.
Yeah.
And like, that was kind of like we were always incorporating less atheism and more arguments about politics and like more various other stuff of like I had lots of my one friend is a astrophysicist, so she would come on and do like physics stuff and science and stuff. It was much less like, hey, God isn't real and here's logical fallacies 101.
Yeah, I was always trying to do stuff like that too. Like try to, if I could frame it, because I mean, even before I thought of myself as an atheist, even before I really was an atheist, like when I was a little kid, I mean, I always loved Carl Sagan.
Right.
I loved Richard Dawkins's biology work before he went nuts and became like a weird right-wing culture warrior.
Yeah.
So I've loved space travel, and as soon as I learned what evolution was and the story it told about how life on Earth got to be where it is now from its origin. Right. I mean, I've always been fascinated by that. So anytime I could, do an atheism related video, but actually talk more about science.
Yeah.
I would rather, and again, my background is not remotely in science. I was an English major in college, so I can sound smart, but that's about it. But like, that was always my preference, is if I can, do something that is, scientific and educational, obviously always at like a 101 level, because that's kind of about where I am.
Right.
And I don't want to punch above my weight and act like I know all about the theory of relativity. I don't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know any more than anybody else does, unless you're like an actual scientist. But yeah, I was always more interested in trying to do that stuff than, let's have another debate. Like, I did debates. I did a couple of debates with like creationists or apologists. And after like the third or fourth one, I just was like, what is the point of this?
Right. Yeah. Like,
what am I accomplishing?
I was always a little surprised that like somebody like Matt Dillahunty, who has like a very, I guess, he's a very smart guy. He's a fast thinker. He can retain a lot of information and use it, right? But he's done all these debates over and over and over again. And I don't know, at some point it would just seem like meaningless to me and endless.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? I used to think the same thing about Christopher Hitchens.
Right.
Because when he published God Is Not Dead, which was his big contribution to the new atheist, canon.
Yeah.
He did a book tour where every stop, instead of just going to a bookstore and like reading from the book and signing autographs and stuff, he actually had a debate with, a Christian or a creation scientist or whatever. And yeah, a lot of them ended up on YouTube. And of course, in my early years as an atheist, I was like devouring all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But even for me at that point, I was like, all right, this is like the fourth or fifth one of these I've watched. This can't be fun for him anymore.
Yeah.
Like, how many more times is he supposed to stand there and listen to this doofus,
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got to say the same. And that, he did that series where he was like debating the same guy in different cities for a while.
Yeah. He
not even new.
He debated Dinesh D'Souza a lot.
Oh,
and I
man.
was like,
yeah.
And he turned out to be a complete, fanatic and like a Trump supporter and an election denier and all these things. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I wonder if Hitchens keeps debating this guy because he's like, it's like the Washington Generals and Hitchens is the Harlem Globetrotters. And he's like, I want to have a debate, but it's a debate that, I barely even have to show up and I'm going to win. Like, this guy barely, he doesn't even know what day it is. Like, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I only ever did one debate, and it was actually against other atheists. I was arguing that universities have the right to deplatform people if they want.
And oh boy, I remember that. Yeah.
So
no, we have to listen to everybody. We must give everybody equal time. Okay. Well, have fun with that.
So flat earthers then, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Evolution deniers. Come on.
Any kook with a wacky idea. Well, let's hear him out. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just the racist ones. Just the racist.
Yeah. Is your flat earth theory racist? If so, please, you are welcome at our university.
That's right. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it is. That was another jumping off point for me in the atheist community. There were a couple. Feminism was the first big one.
Right.
Where I was like, why is everybody mad at feminism? Like,
that's the one that made you enemy number one, right?
That was because I think because I wasn't like apologetic about it.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, well, come on, guys, let's be reasonable here. Feminism's done some good things and everything's more complicated than black or white. I was like, no, to hell with this. If you have a problem with this, then it's your problem. Like, there's nothing. You can always look into any civil rights movement or human rights movement and find people that have said or done things that are problematic or that are controversial. Sure. But if you look at it as a whole, there's no argument against it.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Like, feminism is a good thing. And feminists, as a rule, are good people who have advanced humanity in the right direction. And if you have a problem with that, that's your problem.
For sure.
There were a lot of atheists who really didn't like me because of that.
Yeah, it was very strange for me to because I wasn't really a feminist, but I wasn't an anti-feminist. I always considered myself in favor of like women's rights and whatnot. And then I saw all this uproar over it, and I'm like, why does everybody hate Rebecca Watson? Why does everybody hate
Yeah.
Steve Shives? What's going on here?
And it's like, oh, she doesn't want to be propositioned in an elevator at 3:00 in the morning.
Sounds fair to me. Like,
sounds completely fair to me.
yeah.
I don't like people talking to me in public in the middle of the day, let alone in the middle of the night when I'm on my way to my room to go to bed. And, you know, and it's a situation where I might potentially, you know, be in danger. Like,
for sure.
And then like the whole, you know, the Anita Sarkeesian thing that, you know, should have had nothing to do with the atheist community at all, except, you know, a major atheist YouTuber decided to launch this crusade against her because people decided that she didn't like video games enough or didn't like video games the right way or was just pretending to be a gamer, which I don't even understand why I should have been mad about that, even if it was true.
No, I don't care if somebody likes games or not.
It's like, exactly. It's like I'm a professional wrestling fan. If I find someone who seems like a quote unquote fake wrestling fan, I just don't pay attention to them. Yeah. I don't care if they're pretending to like the thing I like. Okay, well, what do you care?
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
you know.
I watched a lot of those videos during that time. And I mean, maybe you don't have to agree with everything she said, but she wasn't wrong a lot of the time. Like a lot of it was real.
You know what it was? You know what I think it was? She was doing critical analysis of video games.
Yeah.
And that was what people had a problem with. And it's not that she wasn't the first one to ever do that, but she was one of the early YouTubers that did that and became known for it and kind of made that her thing for a while. And there were people who were gamers who weren't used to their thing being treated like every other form of art. Like, can you imagine someone who loves movies getting mad at a movie critic? Like, just for having a different opinion. Like, if a movie critic wrote a review of like one of my favorite movies and they gave it a bad review, so I made it my mission in life to destroy them. Like, that's the kind of thing that it was. It was like, you can watch her videos and disagree with what she's saying about video games and say, well, I disagree with that analysis, or I think she's being unfair here or there. That's completely valid. Sure. That's the way criticism works. But to say like she must be destroyed because she said something I didn't agree with about a video game, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they tried to dig up all kinds of dirt on her too. Like, she had a GoFundMe or something that she was doing for a long form documentary or something.
Yeah.
And like, they tried to find inconsistencies in her finances and whatnot, and there wasn't anything as far as I can remember.
No, they were grasping at so many straws. I remember once there was a mini uproar because there was a promotional photo of her because she did like an interview with a magazine or a newspaper or something, and they took like pictures of her to go with the story. And in one of the pictures, she's like holding a video game controller. And there were people that were like JFK assassination conspiracy theorists, like zooming in on, the controller's not even connected.
She's not holding it right. And like,
it's like, it's a picture for a story. The photographer probably said, okay, you're known for video game stuff. Here, hold a controller, pretend to play a video game. Sure. Like, it doesn't prove anything. Like, she doesn't even know how to turn on a video game system. Like, dude, relax. All right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like I think that around that time, like I was still kind of in between, and actually like Christina Hoff Sommers, she's awful, but she had a very pro men type of feminism that she was promoting.
Yes.
And I was fully on board with that. Once I heard of pro man feminism, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm a feminist. But it wasn't very long before I realized, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
All feminism is actually pro everybody. Like that's
Yeah, exactly. Like I tried to explain that to people. And again, like going back to like the scientific stuff and how I'm at the 101 level with science. It's pretty much where I'm at with feminist theory as well. I mean, there was a period where I tried to read a little bit just to sort of, so I would know what to say if somebody threw a question at me or something. but I've never been like a scholar of feminist theory at all. It used to make me laugh. Like people, like the anti-feminist people, they would challenge me to debate them on feminism. And I would say, why do you want to, if you actually care about this subject and you want to have it, and your idea is let's have a debate so that people can watch it and be educated. Why do you want to debate me about feminism? I'm not the expert. I'm just a guy who said, I think it's a good thing and I'm not mad about it and I support it. Like I never said I was the expert. And
I'm not the guy to debate. In fact,
exactly,
like an academic or something.
Exactly. So yeah, but there was a lot of that going around of like, I challenge you to debate some so-and-so about feminism. No, I'm not going to do that. But of course,
that doesn't work because patriarchy, feminism, like it deals in facts, right? Like, so you can't really debate that against an academic. You have to debate somebody who's like got the one-on-one level. So
Exactly. And yeah, and I mean, most of it is most of the reasons behind feminism, as far as like the social inequalities that exist that feminists are attempting to address, aren't really arguable. Like they're pretty well established facts that these inequalities exist in all of the ways that we can actually quantify them.
Yeah.
In terms of like pay gaps and the paid versus unpaid labor and which gender does more of which. I mean that you can't really argue with that. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's right. Like even like I'm not a big one on putting people in power. But like, even if you look at like who has the power in society, like it's always men with maybe one or two smatterings of, women having a spot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so something's going on there, right? Like,
it's not just a coincidence that the men just happen to run pretty much everything.
Yeah. I mean, to watch things that are made like in the 50s or earlier, like, and you go like, well, okay, so they just dismissed women then, like they just treated them, like,
well, and like not only that, I mean, when you watch movies or TV shows it still happens occasionally today, not as often because there is, for all of the problems that still exist with Hollywood and stuff and the movie and TV industries, there is at least enough awareness of gender issues that this kind of thing doesn't happen as often as it used to. But you used to see movies and TV shows all the time where like it should, the main character of the story should have been a woman, but the woman character was like off here to the side, and it was this guy, the man character was actually the protagonist. And you're like, wait a minute, all the things that are happening in this plot have to do with her. Why isn't the story about her? What are you doing here?
He's just the action hero that comes in.
Yeah. It's like, why not just make it about her? But that was the mentality that, well, men go to see movies more often than women do, or women don't like this kind of movie or whatever. That was one of the reasons why Silence of the Lambs was, why a lot of people really like Silence of the Lambs. Again, and Silence of the Lambs has other problems that we recognize now. There's some, transphobic stuff in it, and which is unfortunate, but it's there, and I think you should recognize it and not deny it and not be protective of, I like that movie, it's not transphobic. Like, no, things you like can have problems. It's okay.
For sure.
But the fact that the hero of that movie is Clarice, she's not like the sidekick of a guy who is the real hero. Like, she's the hero of that movie and she's the protagonist. And that wasn't nearly as common in 1991 when that movie came out, as it is today. Sure. And it's
Yeah, I don't know. I'm on a 90s movie kind of kick. Like, I rewatched Heat not that long ago.
Oh, what a great movie.
Yeah. But like movies in the 90s, they even are pretty sexist. Like, it's pretty clear.
Heat. Yeah, absolutely. Heat is a great movie, but Heat is a total sausage fest. I mean, all the women are like girlfriends or wives or daughters. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. They're like not even characters in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it sucks. But
that, like Natalie Portman's in that movie as the daughter who tries to kill herself, and like, what a waste of talent.
Yeah.
But No, so one of the videos that I'm sure it was you.
Okay.
You took down Sam Harris on transphobia.
Okay, I think I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of back. I think it was right around the time when he was arguing. He was doing Charles Murray stuff too, and
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, so Sam Harris fucking sucks, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think with the atheist community, as much as we would deny it, right, and view it as like, oh, that's we don't have sacred cows in the atheist community because we're skeptics and we're all about the scientific method and we try, we don't have biases and we don't have blah blah blah, all those things that people used to say.
Yeah.
But oh man, when one of our favorites showed his ass, boy, we couldn't cover it up for him fast enough. And Sam Harris was one of those guys where it's like, people got attached to him because of, Letters to a Christian Nation, right, or, his new atheist books. And then when it turned out that, like all the other four horsemen, unfortunately, that he had these massive blind spots. And when he opened his mouth on certain subjects, it was obvious he had no idea what he was talking about.
And then he couldn't stop talking about those things.
Yeah. And he it's like for a guy who's supposedly so smart and so rational, you could not teach him anything. Remember the thing about, he said we should start racially profiling people at airports.
Yep.
And he had a security expert who has been doing this kind of work for decades, who has worked for airlines and stuff.
Said, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Even if you completely disregard the racist part of it, even if you say, well, that doesn't matter, it doesn't work. And he just didn't accept it. Here's this guy, Sam, this guy knows more about this than you do.
Yeah.
Right. He has more experience in this than you have. He's the expert. You're not. Why are you being so stubborn about this? But that's his whole deal.
Yeah. It reminds me of his conversation with Ezra Klein about Charles Murray's book and the race and IQ debate. Ezra Klein talked to the guy, the expert on IQ at the time. Yeah. And Sam Harris was just like, nah, no, it doesn't. I don't think so. It doesn't work that way, or whatever it was.
Yeah, and it's like I said. I mean, it's frustrating, but I got very well practiced at just letting people go.
Yeah,
I mean, I even did that with Hitchens to a certain extent.
Right.
I still admire Hitchens as a writer and as a wit. He was a very funny guy, but I mean, he was incredibly sexist.
Yep.
Even though he also and that's the thing, he would argue vociferously for the empowerment of women politically.
Right.
But then in his personal life, and I mean, he would say the most awful, he was one of those guys that tried to say women can't be funny.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you talking about?
Why is this? Yeah.
So, and he had all kinds of, problems, but that I had to be like, okay, well, he's not, and he unfortunately died. But, for me, the selfish part of me is well, at least, I don't have to live through him turning out to be, after he was so anti-Bush. And even in the 90s, when he was more of a leftist, he was anti-Bill Clinton. He was one of the loudest voices, from the left.
Yeah.
Because a bunch of people hated Clinton from the right. Hitchens was someone from the left who was like, no, actually, yeah, Clinton's an asshole. And it's would he have continued to be that, or would he have gotten to the point? Actually, you know what? I was too hard on Henry Kissinger. Maybe he had the right idea. What are you doing? What are you doing? So we'll never know. But
yeah, we got lucky with that one. We can remember him still semi-fondly.
Semi-fondly, yeah. He didn't go Dawkins on us, where you're just oh my, what happened to you, man?
Yes, they're right to take your Humanist of the Year award away.
It's they're of course they're right. Nobody told you to start throwing transphobia around, dude.
Yeah.
You did that yourself.
Just cultural Christian nonsense.
Yeah. Oh God. Can you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah. I miss Hitchens in some ways, but yeah, I'm so glad that he died, because I'm sure he'd be a reactionary troll now. Like,
I mean, it's the safe bet. Like, I would like to think that he wouldn't be, but it's the safe bet because it's happened to so many other,
and he was an arrogant guy. He was pretty sure of himself. So that seems to be the way that goes, is like.
Yeah. And I mean, I hope that I have learned that lesson well enough that I can sort of correct for that as I get older, because I mean, I do think it is kind of a generational thing.
Yeah.
I do think that, as when you're a younger person and your worldview kind of solidifies, and then you get old and the social issues change, and, maybe certain things get better and certain things get worse, and you get a little more disconnected from things. Maybe you're not as actively involved in stuff as you used to be. And you hear someone in their 20s complaining about something, and you're in your 50s or 60s, and you think, oh, these kids today, a bunch of crybabies. And, I would hope that wouldn't be me. But I don't know. Like, that's kind of what I think. That's what happened with Dawkins, and what, probably would have happened with Hitchens eventually, and what happens to a lot of people, even people who were on the right side decades ago.
Yeah.
Like, they don't move with the times. They don't keep their ear to the ground. And, I mean, that's why there are people who were involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, and the feminist movement and the gay rights movement in the 80s, who are now like anti-trans.
Right.
And they can't see that it's the same issue.
Yeah.
Like, they don't recognize that it's the same thing, just with a different group of people,
Yeah, I've been noticing, like, one of the things I used to do was I would keep up with new music all the time. I would buy magazines and whatnot. And I've noticed now, by the time I recognize new music, it's been out for 6 months at least.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have to remind myself to listen to new music, because I fall so easily back into listening to stuff that I listened to 20 years ago.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I hope that when it comes to social issues, I don't become that. Like, I don't want to be 6 months behind social issues, going like, oh, well, what were they even complaining about? Like, no, I'd rather be on the moving forward along with the youth, I guess.
And listening is a good skill. And I think that's really important. When there's a group of people out on the streets in huge numbers protesting something.
Yeah.
And you don't really know anything about it at first, because you haven't been paying attention, or it's an issue that you weren't really aware of. Instead of jumping to a conclusion and going like, oh, they should get out of this. Well, they're not going to accomplish anything. They're just making everything worse, or they have no right to complain. When I was a kid, we really had it rough, or whatever. Listen to what they're saying, find out what they're mad about. And chances are, I mean, unless it's like a January 6th type situation. But the thing is, people on the far right don't really do street protests as at least not. I mean, every once in a while you'll get like a Nazi rally kind of thing. But, if there's like a big social injustice and there's people all across the country taken to the streets, that's usually on the progressive side, not on the conservative side.
Yeah.
So chances are they're mad about something that they should be mad about.
Yeah. So you're better off listening than telling them to shut up, kind of thing.
Yeah. Like the student protesters who were protesting the Gaza genocide earlier this year and last year. It's like, okay, you can quibble about their tactics if you want, but they're on the right side. Like they're mad about the right thing. Yeah. And it's not as simple as telling, oh, go back to class,
Right. Yeah. And now those same kids are being punished for that, right? Like,
yeah.
Pretty brutal stuff. But it's funny because I work with a lot of what are like, I guess they're all younger than me by enough that they're millennials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that long ago that I was working with guys that are just slightly older than me that were like complaining about millennials. And now it's like these same guys that you were just complaining about are now doing the job that you did before, and they're doing it just as well. And they're not lazy because of their age group or any of that stuff. Like,
no.
And Gen Z is like, they're another victim of that generation thing where like, well, we get to call the young people lazy and unwise or whatever.
I think that's a cyclical thing. I think that every generation of people gets judged as that by people their parents or grandparents' age, no matter what specifically is going on. You know, I saw an article years ago. I can't remember how I even found it, but it was around the time it was maybe 15 years ago when smartphones first came out. And everybody had like an iPhone, and this was like a new thing. And of course, there were people, oh, these kids are always on their phones and nobody talks to each other anymore. And people still complain about that. But this was like when that started, like, oh, they're just looking down at their screens and they don't even talk to each other anymore. And someone dug up like a newspaper article or an article from a journal or something from the 1800s.
Yeah.
Where someone said,
right?
Someone said basically the exact same thing about the telephone.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
People are going to be on the phone. They're on the phone all day talking to people and they don't pay attention to their family in their own house. It's like, so it's the same complaint. Oh, yeah. Like when, earlier than that, when they're reading novels and they're not
interacting.
They're not interacting. Like no matter what the latest thing is, there's always going to be somebody who is a reactionary who's like, oh, no, this is going to ruin everything. It's like, no, probably not. Just calm down.
Yeah, I find myself like in a kind of in that in between, because a lot of the left, like when it comes to some new technology, can be like that kind of like anti-tech kind of mentality. And so a lot of that I get, right? Like AI is a weird bubble where it like uses a lot of resources and like it's damaging to the environment, and it's not actually terribly useful sometimes.
It doesn't really solve very many problems.
But also I don't want to be the guy who's like, no, we can't ever use that thing just in case it actually doesn't. Well,
I guess the thing is like you're not anti-AI just because it's new.
Right.
Like you can point to specific problems with the way it's being used right now. And because maybe conceivably in the future, there may be a way to do this kind of thing that is more environmentally responsible and that doesn't, rely on, taking other people's stuff as training data without their permission. And, we might be able to solve these problems so that there could be, an AI in the future that does the same kinds of things that it's supposed to do now, but in a more responsible way. So you're not saying, "Oh, this is bad because it's new." You're like, "No, there are specific things about
there's actual issues with this."
Yeah,
I'm trying not to be anti-AI, but I'm also trying to acknowledge the issues.
And and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm a very I think I get this from my grandfather. My grandfather, for his entire life, was always very pro technology and was always interested in like what the next new thing was. And like he died before smartphones were a thing, but I know if he had lived, he would have had it. Like he was always like, he wanted like the new gadget. He was always and I'm the same way. So, reflexively, I'm like excited about AI. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You go on Chat GPT and you can talk to it and it'll answer you and you can ask it a question and hey, come up with, a video title for this. And here's what the video is about. And it's like, what about this? Like, it's cool. But then you think, oh, but a lot of this is, it's not as automatic as it looks. Sometimes like it's there, there's actually more human input on the other end than they want you to think there is. And there's like the resource issue where it uses so much electricity and then the scraping of other people's work without their permission or without their knowledge a lot of the time even. And it's like, oh, there are some real issues with this that need to be resolved before I can embrace this.
Yeah. It's and it makes me think of Google just made a plan to like build like 25 small nuclear reactors.
Like,
oh boy, I don't know if I like that.
Wait a minute. It's like, and the federal government broke Microsoft Microsoft up for doing way less than that. It's like they were just like, hey, you sell too much software. You need to. You're a monopoly. We need to break you up. And now Google's like, we're taking over the world.
That's right.
What should we do? Should we do something?
Somebody really ought to do something.
Somebody should do something, you know?
Yeah. No, I saw that article and I was like, oh boy, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Who told them they could do that?
Yeah,
Can you just build a nuclear reactor if you have the money? Can you just do that?
I guess so. Yeah.
I mean,
No, yeah. No, it's a very strange way of doing things, but
yeah.
yeah. So I guess you cover a lot of like pop culture and stuff now. Like,
Sure.
do a movie podcast.
Yeah. Me and my best friend Jason Harding. We've done it for God. It's probably been close to 10 years now. I can't remember exactly how long it's been.
Oh wow!
But
Okay.
yeah, it's called Late Seating, and we do 2 shows a month. And it's it's classic movies. Jason's rule is it has to be at least 10 years old, and
Okay.
it doesn't have to be a good movie, but it does have to be like, it has to have some cultural significance, like a movie that if you mention the name of it to a random person, they'll probably have heard of it. You know, it can't be like an
Okay. Yeah.
obscure little cult film or something. And yeah, I love doing it. It's a great excuse to watch movies.
For sure.
And yeah, we just recorded the next episode yesterday, and it's October, so we're doing horror movies. So
Okay.
we did An American Werewolf in London,
Oh, nice.
which is an old favorite of mine. So yeah,
The classic.
yeah.
Yeah, it's and your channel you cover a lot of Star Trek, but you've been doing a lot of political stuff the last little while.
Yeah, it's sort of striking while the iron is hot. You know, I wish that it wasn't like this, but there is a certain level of like sort of mercenary, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, the political videos are getting views. Better do some more of those, you
Right.
know. I mean, again, like I like my favorite videos that I've ever done are the little comedy videos that I do with me and a cast of stuffed animals.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if I've said going way back, I said, if these start getting like 1 million views a video, this is all I'm doing, you
Right.
know, because like that's where my heart lies. And, but yeah, you know, it's my job. It's how I pay the bills. And I don't hate doing the political videos. Like I enjoy talking about politics. And I think especially this election coming up is really important.
For sure.
And if I can add my small little voice to the choir, and you know what I mean, and make some contribution, I want to do that. But you know, going back to what we were saying about, you know, transitioning out of doing atheist stuff, part of what makes the YouTube channel continually interesting to me, and the reason why I've never really felt burned out on it, even though I've done it for so long, is that I do talk about different stuff. So,
Yeah.
you know, like I've been working all day today as we're sitting here recording this on editing a Star Trek video.
Nice.
Over the weekend, I did 2 little like weird comedy skit videos that one of them I released today and it's doing all right. It's getting decent views. The other one, I don't know if anybody's going to get it or watch it at all, but I was like, I had the idea and I did it and I'm happy with it. And, you know, we'll see what people think of it when it comes out. But, you know, I need to do things like that for my own sake.
Fair enough.
So it doesn't, because it, I mean, and you know, as a podcaster, like even though you're doing something that you've chosen to do, and even though you enjoy it, there are times when it's a job. It feels like work.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like that. You know, find a way to do something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. It doesn't. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work that way. But it's better than. I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I do, and I don't have to do what most people do, which is you go and work somewhere that you don't really have a passion for, but you do that because you have to pay the bills. And if you're lucky, you have enough time left over to do the thing you really want.
Well, that's good though.
Yeah.
I always dreamed that podcasting would become my job, but I'm just lucky enough that my job allows a pretty good work-life balance.
Yeah.
So I work for a week and then I have a week off, and then I work for a week and then I have a week off. So
yeah, that's a pretty good deal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't, at this point, I've done this job for 12 years, almost 13 years. I don't know how other people work 5 days a week and 2 days off. That's nonsense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or truckers who work 10 and 4. Like, come on,
man.
what's happening, man?
Yeah.
Where's your life? Like,
yeah. Well, how do you, yeah, exactly. Where do you actually get the life part in? Like, yeah.
No, it's, I consider myself quite privileged, even though I'm not podcasting for a living. I'm pretty lucky in my,
Well, yeah. I mean, think about, it sounds like your situation is kind of like Jason, my best buddy who I do the podcast with, because yeah, I mean, being a podcaster is not his job either. I don't think
right.
the podcast he and I do, I don't think they make any money. I mean, it's not a profitable venture at all. We do it because we love it.
Yeah.
And, and he has, a regular job that pays his bills and puts food on the table for his family. And he has, enough time left over to do the podcasting thing, which is, one of the things that he really loves to do. And, I mean, look how many people either don't have the time to do that or the energy to do it left over after they're done working, or they try to start a podcast or something creative, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work out. They can't sustain it, so it's
things get in the way, and
yeah,
for sure. It's I mean, being a podcaster or a YouTuber, it's a bit of a grind. So you have to be able to focus on it. And it's just like, if stuff gets in the way, like that, a lot of people can get stopped in their tracks, especially if it's like, you only have 3 hours at the end of your day to do this, right? And you got to somehow fit it into that.
Yeah.
No, it's tough. But so we're almost up at the hour. But before we go, I want to ask you a question that may not be interesting to anybody else.
Okay.
How do you decide when to stop writing something?
Oh, okay.
For your videos, because I've got a few video essays on the go, and I'm like, this is getting out of hand. Like, I've written too much.
It's not always easy. I'm lucky in that usually, like, I know when I've gotten to the end. And so it depends on the video. Like, usually I have, whether it's like a politics video or like a movie review or a Star Trek video or whatever, I usually, before I actually start writing the script, I have at least some idea of what my main points are going to be. Right. And sometimes if I don't have it clear in my head, I'll actually just go ahead and write them down, just do like a bullet point list of like, okay, I want to cover this and this and this. So when I get to all of that stuff in the script, I know I'm done. And then more often than not, my problem is, okay, how do I end this? Because I don't want to just be like, okay, that's all I have to say. Bye. I want to have some kind of a closing so that it feels like if somebody, does me the compliment of watching the whole thing, it's like, oh, it had like a punchline, or it had an argument, a point was made at the end.
There's an conclusion. Kind of thing.
Yeah. So more often than not, that's my problem. But there have been times where, like, especially with the longer Star Trek videos, where if I'm talking about something where there's like a bunch of different examples of the kind of thing the video is about, and I'm looking at the page count on the script, and I'm like, oh boy, and I can kind of and I kind of know from doing it, like I know generally how long the video is going to be. And I'm like, oh man, this is too long. I'm not making it, because my personal rule, and there are a lot of YouTubers, like a lot of YouTubers who I love, who do great work. They will occasionally do like these 3 and 4 hour videos.
Yeah.
And I'm just never going to do that. Like, I'm never going to ask an audience to sit and watch a video of mine for 4 hours. And I know people say, well, they don't watch it all at once. They watch a little bit and then they come back to it and they watch a little bit more. But this is where I, as the creator, get kind of dictatorial. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not how I want them to watch it.
Right.
Like, I feel like I want them, it's like, you can watch it however you want. If you want to watch my videos 5 minutes at a time, that's fine. You have the right to do that. But I, as the creator, would prefer it if you watch it all in one sitting, because that's how I wrote it. That's how I designed it. Yeah. That's what it's meant. That to me is the ideal way of consuming it. Yeah. But if I make a video that's 4 hours long and it's mostly just me talking, right? That's a big ask to the
for
audience.
sure.
I don't feel like I would ever ask the audience to do that. So my personal rule.
Yeah, there's a few people that I'm willing to watch those videos, but
me too. Yeah.
There's a few, but a lot of them I'm not. Or I'll send the video to my partner and she'll be like, I'm not watching that. It's 3 hours long.
I'm the same way. I'm, as far as like movies, the older I've gotten, the bigger, I'm a much bigger baby now than I ever used to be about running time of movies. If I'm watching a movie and we get too far past 2 hours, I'm like, all right, let's wrap this up. This doesn't need to be this long. And there are exceptions. Seven Samurai, one of the greatest movies ever made, and it's way over 3 hours. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, he should have cut that. No, it's perfect the way it is. But that's the exception. There are movies that seem ridiculously long, but if you actually sit down and watch them, that's like, oh, okay, it needs to be this long.
Right.
But as a rule, if you go in 90 minutes to 2 hours, that's all that most people need. Yeah. That's all most stories need. If you've decided I'm going to tell this story as a movie, if you need more than 2 hours, double check, really ask yourself, do I really need it to be this long? And for me with YouTube videos, it's the same thing. If I get too far, if I get up to 20 pages in a script and I'm writing when I write my video scripts, it's single spaced, just in a Google Doc. So if I get up toward 20 pages, that's when I start thinking, all right, I need to go back and take another look at this. Yeah. And I need to start thinking about, I need to murder my darlings here. I need to start go, okay, I can do without this. I can do without this. I can do without this. I made this point already, and just kind of trim it down to make it as tight as it can be without losing anything. And, but it can be tough. And sometimes the best thing to do is to just write the whole thing. If you're writing something and it's just going on forever, but you still, you're not at the end yet, just write it all the way and don't, however long it comes out, that's how long it is. Yeah, exactly. You write it, and that's, I haven't written, I haven't written that way for a while because I usually don't have time because of my production schedule. But to me, that's one of the best ways to write is just write your first draft is just write it until it's done, and then go back and then you start to shape it. And then you cut stuff out and change stuff and rearrange stuff.
Yeah. That's kind of how the podcast, the interviews and stuff kind of started. Because I initially was going to do video essays with this channel. But then I started writing and I never stopped writing. So then I was like, well, I got to put something out. I got to do an interview.
Right.
And then my buddy Justin, I was like, hey, why don't you do book reviews on the show sometimes? Because I'm never going to finish this script. So let's do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
My friend Felicia told me that you got to sometimes sacrifice some of the context because if you add all the context, you're starting at the beginning of the universe. So
yeah. You have to, it helps to have a clear and if possible, simple idea of what you're trying to accomplish in the thing, whatever it is, the essay, the video, whatever it is. And if you find yourself straying too far from that, then that's usually when you have to kind of wind it in and say, okay, this is interesting, but this doesn't really serve my main point, and it's not about presenting every single thought you ever had about the thing.
Right.
I think a lot of YouTubers kind of fall into that trap.
Right?
Yeah. Well, again, if that's how it comes out when you write it, that's fine. But when it comes time to actually get it into shape where you're actually going to do something with it, that's when you have to start being a little ruthless with yourself and saying, okay, I really, this is an interesting tangent I went off on, but it doesn't really serve my main point. And maybe if the thing, if we're talking about a video, maybe if the video was going to be 10 minutes long and I went off on a little rabbit trail for 2 minutes, that's not so bad. But if I'm going to be making a 2-hour video and I'm going off about this thing for 20 minutes, I can lose that,
Yeah. No, that's fair. It's one of those things. I'm not what I would consider a good writer. I'm a blue collar guy. I dropped out of high school. I flunked out of university after that. I'm a grunt in the oil field in Saskatchewan, and I happen to be an avid reader and learner, right?
Sure.
So I'm also trying to develop writing skills and do these things. And like, I think I'm coming up with some good stuff, but like I keep adding new things into it. Like this one where I'm trying to connect various philosophies into anarchism.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, okay, well, we got Zapatistas, Rojava in Turkey. You've got, what about Ubuntu in South Africa? And
You
what
keep
about
coming up with examples. Yeah.
land back and indigenous people's philosophies? What about this?
Yeah.
So at some point, it doesn't need to go in there.
There's a really great line that I've always loved from the movie Wonder Boys, which was also a book, but I haven't read the book, but I've seen the movie. But there's a movie, it's a great movie. It came out in like 2000, I think like in the year 2000, 2001, something like that. But it's about a guy he's a college professor, but he was an author, and his first book that he published was like this best-selling masterpiece, and everybody loved it. And he's been working on the follow-up to it for like the last 10 years. And the book has just completely ballooned out of control. And he's still working on it. And his agent is like, where's the book? And he's like, still working on it. And eventually he has his star student this year in school. And he gives the manuscript to her. And he says, please read this and tell me what you think. So she reads this gigantic doorstop of a manuscript. And she comes back after she's finished it. And he says, what did you think? She says, you know how in writing class, you're always telling us that writing is about making choices? And he says, yeah. And she says, you didn't make any choices. and that's like, to me, that's like the best writing advice I've ever heard. It's like, sometimes you have to make, especially if you're writing fiction, but even if you're writing nonfiction, like if you have a point that you want to make, then make sure that you're serving that point. And if you're going too far out of your way, or you're throwing in lots of examples, but maybe you don't need every single one of those. Yeah. Then consider cutting some stuff out. Because the other thing is, nobody except you is ever going to know what you cut out.
That's true.
Unless you tell them, right? Like if you write it and then you have 150 pages and you're like, this is way too long, and you cut it down to 25 pages, to you, you're like, I hacked almost all of it off. But when you show the finished product to somebody, they're not going to know what you cut out. They're only going to know what you're showing them. So, that's what's most important.
For sure.
The finished product is what's most important.
They don't necessarily know what you feel like you missed.
Exactly. And awesome. if they're really interested in it and they want to talk to you about it, apart from the work, and you want to have that conversation, well, then you have all this other stuff that you can tell them that you didn't put in the thing. And they're going to think you're the smartest guy in the world because he has all this stuff off the top of his head that wasn't even in this thing. But, you're just remembering it from all that stuff you had to cut out.
Yeah, that's right. So you look smart in two ways. That's pretty good.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate your time, Steve. And I guess, where can people find you on the internet?
YouTube.com/Steve Shives is the main place where you can see more of me than you could ever possibly want. And I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Threads and Blue Sky and I think Mastodon. I think that's it. Oh, you're Instagram, but I don't use. I'm on Instagram, but every once in a while I'll post a picture, but I don't do a whole lot on Instagram. But I'm all over the place. But youtube.com/Steve Shives is my channel, and that's the main place.
Right on. Well, thanks again for your time.
Absolutely. I had a great time. It was a good conversation.
All right, folks, that's all for now. Thanks for watching or listening. Remember to share this show with your friends or on the social media site that you use the most. Thank you to everyone who supports this show on Patreon. I really appreciate it, and it helps me keep the power on. Thanks to my top patrons, Damian Marie Athope, Some Random Geek, Justin Clark, Dan F. Smith, and Lisa Glass. And thank you to my new patrons. You can stay tuned for the list of patrons at the end to see your name listed. If you aren't a patron and want to contribute, you can do that at patreon.com/skepticalleftist, or you can send a one-time donation to buymeacoffee.com/skepticallefty. I also have a Substack where you can subscribe for free or you can donate per month. And lastly, you can get a paid subscription on Spotify that will give you the same access to bonus content and extra long episodes. If you can't contribute financially, then a like on YouTube or a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or one of the podcast review sites like Podchaser would be great. If you want to find more from me, then make sure to check out the show notes for links to all my stuff, or check out my link tree. It's linktr.ee/skepticalleftist. That's where you can find all of my social media spaces and communities. You can also email me at mindofaskepticalleftist@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening or watching. Make sure to leave a comment on the video, join your local org, print off some posters or pamphlets, and spread the propaganda.
And people grew up with that and never really questioned it. It was just part of what Superman was.
Yeah.
And then you get into the 90s and the 2000s, and especially in like the post 9/11 era, where people start to wake up to, oh, America doesn't always do the right thing.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Superman? Is like, would Superman do the right thing, or would he do the American thing?
Yeah, is he going to stand on the side of the U.S. state, or is he going
to... Yeah, and you think, well, Superman should want to do the right thing. That's what makes him Superman.
That's right.
And then, so then you start to question, like, well, then he can't always stand for the American way, because the American way, I mean, in terms of the American political system that's pretty bad.